A 54-year-old Sharon was shot on June 5, 2000. It was a normal day at work. She was working her usual shift at the John Butler Dry Cleaners on Easley Bridge Road, taking care of our normal customers' daily needs. Sharon was going about her day, but she had no idea that her killer was hiding among her customers. Sharon was born on October 19, 1945, to Leslie and Leona. She and her 6 brothers grew up in St. Louis, Michigan. We don't know much about her husband, but she did move to Greenville County, South Carolina, where she raised her 4 kids in a loving house. In 1990, her son Frank was killed in a terrible accident. Sharon worked at the John Butler Dry Cleaners, and people in her neighborhood knew her. On Monday, June 5, 2000, at 1:30 p.m., an old man came to the dry cleaners to pick up his clothes. He noticed that it was very quiet in the shop. When he walked inside and looked behind the counter, he saw Sharon lying on the floor with blood pooling under her. He ran over to the shop next door right away and called 911. As soon as the call came in, the police were there. When they found Sharon's body, they saw that she had been shot in the back. The cash register was open and empty. Later, police found out that about $200 was taken. They looked for fingerprints and found several on the bar and cash register that had been left there. The police then talked to people who were there that day, but no one could remember anything out of the ordinary happening. Telling Sharon's family, who were horrified by the murder, was the hardest part. Sandy Sander, her sister, fell over when she heard the news. She made a plea to the police while surrounded by her family. Sergeant Mike Brown, a spokesman for the Greenville Sheriff's Office, said that they had gotten a lot of tips, but none of them helped them solve the case. "We still don't have anything like someone describing a suspicious person going into or coming out of the cleaners," he said. Even though people wanted to act and a quick review was done, the case was closed quickly. On June 7, 2000, Sharon's body was taken back to Michigan for a private service for her family. The case did not move forward for the next 22 years. The cold case unit was changed by Sheriff Hobart Lewis in 2022. In the Greenville area, they have been able to close 9 cold cases so far. Sharon's story was a very interesting one. They were able to test the hidden fingerprints they found in and around the cash machine because of new technology. They got a number of hits, and all of them except one were people who worked at the dry cleaners at the time. Investigators chose to start talking to old witnesses again, as well as a few new ones who might have new information. A neighborhood man named Roger Keith Hudgens was mentioned as a possible suspect. Hudgens was born in Greenville on July 14, 1955, and has lived there his whole life. He had served in the U.S. Air Force and worked as a salesman for medical supplies before that. He was married and had kids. He had never been in trouble with the law. At the time Sharon was killed, he was 44 years old. New witnesses said that he did odd jobs around the area and often took the trash out of the dry cleaners. On the day Sharon was shot and killed, it is said that Hudgens planned to rob the dry cleaners. When the anonymous fingerprints were put through the system, they found that they were the same as Hudgens. But Hudgens died in 2008 at the age of 52 from health problems. On January 6, 2003, detectives made it official that Hudgens was the robber with a gun. Investigators said it was a sad and happy time. At the press meeting, Sheriff Hobart Lewis said some kind words. He said that even though no investigation could bring back loved ones, he hoped that Miss Sharon and her family could find peace in knowing that her killer had been found and could no longer hurt anyone else. He also told the group of families of those who had died that they would never give up. Wilomeana Filkins was 81 years old when she was taken from her family in a pointless murder. For almost 30 years, her family tried to find out who did it. When the crime was finally solved and the killer was found, it was a blow to the family to find out that the government would not do what was right. Wilomeana Filkins was born in Rensselaer, New York, on June 9, 1913. She grew up with 8 sisters and 1 brother. She moved to East Greenbush when she was 21 and started working at the state education department. Wilomeana never got married, so she lived at the Coventry Apartments with one of her sisters. She continued to live alone in her retirement after her sister died, and she liked gardening as a hobby. Family and friends liked her a lot, and she stayed in touch with her brothers and their kids. After not hearing from her for 2 days, on August 19, 1994, her family started to worry. Her brother Sterling Filkins and his daughter Carol chose to go see her because she was old and lived alone. When they got to the flat on the ground floor, the door was open. They walked in and called out to Wilomeana, but she didn't answer. When they got to the living room, they saw her dead body. They called the cops right away. Wilomeana had been killed with a blunt object when the cops arrived. After looking around the flat, it was clear that Wilomeana was killed during a robbery. Several of her things were taken, and doors and cabinets were left open. After talking to her family, the cops also found that her white Plymouth Reliant from 1989 was not parked in the usual spot. They figured out that the killer or killers had taken the car, but for some reason brought it back and parked it in the wrong place. The apartment and car were searched for forensic evidence and fingerprints, but the police had no clues. From the interviews with neighbors and family members, it was clear that the crime was committed for no reason other than to steal. An autopsy showed that Wilomeana was killed on August 17, 1994, 2 days before her body was found. She died from a blow to the back of her head. Even though there were a lot of investigations, the case went cold. 3 years later, in 1997, some of Wilomeana's things were left on a road next to the Nassau Schoedeck Cemetery, about 10 miles southeast of her apartment complex. Police in Albany never said what they had found, but they thought that whoever killed Wilomeana knew the area and may have lived nearby. They also thought that the trip was made in her car. This was the closest they had come to finding a clue in the case, but it went cold again. Over the next 20 years, police looked back on the case from time to time as the file was passed on to new detectives. More tests were done on forensic data and fingerprints, but the results were not clear. Then, in 2019, 25 years after the murder, there was a break. A woman gave a tip about Wilomeana's case on April 25, 2019. She was able to tell the police things that only the murderer or someone involved in the killing would know. She said that her ex-boyfriend, Jeremiah James Gayett, had a nervous breakdown in August 2009, when they were still living together. He started crying and talking about robbing and hitting a poor old woman. He told her that he had just left the woman in her apartment, but that he didn't think she was dead. He thought she was okay. Sergeant Michael Guadagnino, the team's leader, and his team started to look into his past and found some interesting things. Gayett was 17 years old in 1994. He had just moved from Minnesota to East Greenbush to live with his father and finish his senior year at Columbia High School. They lived in a different building in the same apartment complex and could see Wilomeana's flat from their window. Gayett's name was on a list of people who were talked to, and he was ruled out as a candidate. Gayett went to Red Hook, New York, after finishing high school. He then joined the U.S. Air Force, but was let go after a few years. After that, he went back to Red Hook and settled in the town of Rosendale. After that, he started driving school buses for the school district and was sometimes hired to drive buses for older people. On October 1, 2019, police went to Gayett's house to talk to him about Wilomeana's case. Guadagnino noticed how defensive Gayett was and how upset he looked when they asked him about the event from 1994. Then, he wouldn't talk to the police without his lawyer there. While he was being questioned, other police teams talked to Gayett's family, friends, and co-workers. They found out that Gayett had been depressed at times over the years. On October 2, 2019, the New York State Police were called to Gayett's home after reports of gunshots. He shot himself in the head with a gun and was found dead in his garage. With the family's approval, Gayett's fingerprints and DNA were taken during the autopsy. Due to delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, Researchers didn't get to see the data until January 2021. Gayett's left thumb matched the unknown fingerprint on Wilomeana's coffee table, but the cops wanted to be sure he was the one who did it. As part of the process, on October 22, 2022, detectives talked to a female relative of Gayett. She said that she had talked to Gayett right before he killed himself. During the conversation, she told the police that she lived out of state and was planning to visit Gayett. During their talk, he told her that he might not be there when she got back from her trip. Gayett then reportedly told her that when he was younger, he wanted to steal a car and rob a bank to get money to pay for college. He then told her that someone else had died, but he didn't want to talk about it over the phone. The family member said that Gayett was scared and didn't want to go to jail. The cousin said that she had made plans for Gayett to talk to an attorney on October 2, 2019, and the attorney confirmed this, but he killed himself before getting to the meeting. After this conversation, detectives were able to tie up all the loose ends in Wilomeana's case and close it after 28 years. Carol Filkins was with her father when they found her aunt's body. She thanked law enforcement on behalf of her whole family for not letting up and still trying to find justice for Wilomeana, even though so much time had passed.